Hey, so this is your next screencast having to do with metabolism. You already know the general information we need to know, how cellular respiration and photosynthesis are related. You also know all of the details about photosynthesis. This part will just focus on cellular respiration. Please take a second to write down the overall equation for cellular respiration. Remember that C6H12O6 is glucose. We get glucose into our bodies through eating food, breaking down that into the basic monomers. And O2, of course, would be oxygen gas. We get that into our bodies by breathing in through our lungs. And the two products that are made are carbon dioxide and water. As we break down glucose, we're actually going to release that energy and use it to make ATP, which drives all of our cellular work. So, cellular respiration. The overall thing is an aerobic process that requires oxygen. It's going to occur in all organisms. This means plants and animals. It also will occur in bacteria, prokaryotes. Just instead of happening in the mitochondria, it will occur in the cytoplasm. Cellular respiration is going to use organic molecules as glucose. They're also going to use oxygen and it will produce carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. On the right, you'll see the picture of a mitochondria. Please draw this and label. It's important that we know the structure of a mitochondria to understand where cellular respiration occurs. This flowchart shows us how cellular respiration occurs. The name of the first process is called glycolysis. And then, if there is no oxygen in the cell can actually survive for a limited amount of time using something called fermentation. However, if there is oxygen present, the cell will make lots and lots and lots of ATP in order to survive. This is the aerobic respiration part that consists of the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain, or ETC. The first process is something called glycolysis. Glyco refers to glucose, lysis means to split or break apart. This is an anaerobic process. Anaerobic means that it does not require oxygen. This will break apart glucose to form pyruvic acids and a little bit of ATP. If you'd like to know more of the chemistry involved, you can look at this picture right here. It's kind of complicated, but what we're able to see here is we start off with one glucose molecule, and through a series of chemical reactions, each reaction is catalyzed by an enzyme, we end up at the very, very end with something called a pyruvic acid. After glycolysis, remember we have two different things that could happen. So if there is no oxygen in the cell, our cells cannot survive in order to produce enough ATP to sustain a multicellular organism, but some organisms can survive without oxygen, and our cells can survive for a limited amount of time. Fermentation, like glycolysis, occurs in the cytoplasm, and its purpose is to allow glycolysis to continue. There are two main types. There's nothing you need to write with this chart, but it's kind of a cool flow chart to see all of the different types of fermentation processes. And of course, there are more that exist, but these are different examples of yeast and bacteria that go through different types of fermentation to make different types of food. Lactic acid fermentation is in many ways the one that's most relevant to you because this is what your cells will go through in the absence of oxygen. It will produce something called lactic acid. It is also used by some bacteria. If you've ever eaten milk or cheese, not milk, but milk products, cheese, yogurt, anything that's made from fermented milk, you have actually eaten the product of lactic acid fermentation. If your muscles have ever been sore after running or working out, that is a result of the lactic acid buildup whenever your cells were making ATP without any oxygen around. That is also why your muscles are sore, because that lactic acid hurts. Alcoholic fermentation occurs in plants and yeast. It's going to make carbon dioxide gas and ethyl alcohol. We use this to make fermented products like beer and wine. This is also how you can make bread. So if you've ever mixed some water and yeast together and seen it bubble, that's fermentation. Those bubbles are carbon dioxide. And then this picture is showing a bowl of dough. The reason why it rose is because the yeast inside of it was going through fermentation. The carbon dioxide bubbles caused the bread to rise. Okay, so normally in your cells, there is oxygen, so your cells will go through aerobic respiration. This will use the pyruvic acid that we made in glycolysis and, of course, oxygen. It is going to produce a lot of ATP, also carbon dioxide that you breathe out, and some water. There are two reactions that occur in aerobic respiration called the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. The Krebs cycle is going to occur in the mitochondrial matrix. It will break down the pyruvic acid into carbon dioxide. As it breaks it down, it puts the energy into ATP, NADH, and FADH2. These two molecules, NADH and FADH2, are energy carrying molecules that will transfer energy from the Krebs cycle to the electron transport chain in order to make ATP. These two molecules, by the way, are forms of B vitamins that if you ever had a B vitamin supplement, it gives you energy. The electron transport chain, this is where most of the ATP is made for the cell. It occurs on the inner membrane of the mitochondria that was called the cristae. This is the reason why we need oxygen. When you go through the electron transport chain, the electrons have to end up somewhere. Oxygen is the final electron acceptor that will, when it combines with the electron, produce water. Without oxygen, there is no final electron acceptor, and ATP cannot be made. And now we have one last review of the relationship between cellular respiration and photosynthesis. It is very, very, very important that we understand that this is a process where the products of cellular respiration will become the reactants of photosynthesis and the reverse. It would be very helpful for you to take a few minutes to study this animation and then draw it using the arrows with the reactants and products.